The Concord Chamber Music Society begins its 2017-2018 season with a program from the Romantic period, as Lincoln Center award-winning pianist Shai Wasner is joined by Society violinist and founder Wendy Putnam for performances of music by Schubert, Schumann, and Chopin, Sunday, October 22nd at 3 p.m. at the Concord Academy Performing Arts Center. All three of the composers on this program were masters of piano music, and the works they wrote for the instrument reflect its rise as the primary musical tool for conveying the core sensibility of the Romantic era, which rejected the more rational, formalistic spirit of the Enlightenment in favor of looking towards emotions and individual experience as more authentic portals to truth. But the growth of the instrument's popularity was also facilitated by developments that were quite concrete. Leaving the pipe organ aside, composers of keyboard works had long been frustrated by the limited color palette at their disposal. One of these limitations grew out of a lack of consensus on how keyboards should be tuned. A fundamental difficulty in tuning instruments with fixed pitches is that when an interval between two notes is tuned or tempered to sound pure, it affects the purity of other intervals. Until the beginning of the 19th century, keyboards were tuned to sound well in a limited number of keys, which across their range usually had no more than 3 sharps or flats. This becomes apparent when we look through lists of works by composers of the Baroque and Classical eras and take note of the keys in which they were written. Towards the end of the 18th century, a tuning system known as equal temperament began to be more widely adopted. In equal temperament, the interval between each adjacent note is equalized across the keyboard. This results in all the other intervals within the 12-note chromatic scale being impure, but only to an extent that's theoretically not too disturbing to the ear. The virtue of equal temperament is that it allows for total flexibility of movement between harmonies and keys, and composers like Schubert, Schumann, and Chopin enthusiastically exploited this potential with rapid juxtapositions of sharp and flat-based harmonies and an increasingly complex harmonic language that allowed them to vividly express the aura of mystery and instability that was essential to the Romantic ethos. Another limitation that had faced composers of keyboard music for centuries was that the dynamic range of the available instruments was negligible at best. The clavichord, which is the true forerunner of the piano, had a touch-sensitive keyboard, but because its mechanism produced sound by having a metal tangent at the inner end of the key strike the string and then remain in contact with it, its sound was so muted that the instrument was unsuitable for concert or ensemble playing. The harpsichord could produce a greater volume of sound, but it was also dynamically limited. When a player presses a key on a harpsichord, it activates a mechanism that plucks the string with a quill, allowing it to ring freely. But the amount of sound can't be altered by finger pressure. Whether the player strikes the key vigorously or gently, the force with which the string is plucked and the resulting volume is always the same. These problems were ostensibly addressed by the invention of the piano in Italy at the end of the 17th century, which employed a mechanism in which a padded hammer strikes a string in direct response to the player's touch of the key and then drops back down, allowing the string to ring. But the instrument wasn't widely adopted until the late 1700s. At that point, new techniques in engineering, precision manufacturing, and mass production that grew out of the Industrial Revolution were creating stronger, more reliable components. This was followed in the early 19th century by the development of piano strings and frames that accommodated much higher tensions, new stringing techniques, expanded keyboards, new hammer coverings, thicker soundboards, and a much greater use of pedals, which, in combination, vastly enlarged the instrument's dynamic and expressive scope. This piano had universal capabilities its 18th century predecessor lacked, and it allowed composers such as Schubert, Chopin, and Schumann to write pieces for the instrument that were worlds within themselves, in which a kaleidoscopic range of sonic colors were used to evoke every possible atmosphere, mood, and nuance, from the grandly orchestral to the most profoundly intimate, all of which are abundantly displayed in the music on this program. We hope you'll join Shai Wasner and Wendy Putnam on Sunday, October 22nd at 3 p.m. at the Concord Academy Performing Arts Center for what will certainly be an enchanting opening of the Concord Chamber Music Society's 2017-2018 season.